Hey everyone, sorry I'm late. I am so sorry I'm late. I had to shush the poodle out of the room, and I'm still not entirely sure if my cat is in this room or not. I try to keep everybody out of here because otherwise they want to say hello and they show up in the show, which I'm sure you guys would love, but at the same time, it just is what it is. So let's go ahead and begin. I'm so excited everyone's here. Whoop, whoop. So, welcome back to our weekly show, Grow Wealthy Grooming. If this is your first time joining, please consider clicking the like button, commenting, or subscribing so you never miss a video. I'm your host, River Lee. I am the founder of the Savvy Groomer. As we know, too many groomers are broke and burnt out. At the Savvy Groomer, we teach pet professionals how to make a simple financial plan so they have money in the bank at the end of the day. At Savvy Groomer, we know that you want to be the savvy pet professional with the paycheck you wouldn't mind others seeing. In order to do that, you need to know how to manage your money and to keep more of what you make. The problem is you have no idea what you're bringing in and where it all goes, which makes you overwhelmed, hopeless, and feeling like wondering if things will ever change. You've been putting in the time, but you don't have anything to show for it. We believe no one should have to groom till they die. I understand. I went from living in my car to owning multiple pet grooming businesses. I use my expertise to work with clients internationally and have a proven track record. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Feel free, guys. There's a comment section right below. Feel free to give comments if you guys want to hear more about something or need some clarification about it. All right, let's begin. So I want to say first that I've never been one to immediately respect my elders, as I think age does not dictate character, knowledge, or achievement. I know that sounds a little bit rude, but what I believe personally is that success isn't measured by time. And as we all know, by the OK Boomer movement, the market has changed by things like student loans, buying a house, getting a job, and family life, right? Everything has changed dramatically. So let's talk about somebody who's been grooming 20 or 30 years. I don't know about you, but I know a lot of people who've been grooming for 20 or 30 years and they suck at grooming. I have seen some pictures and posts by somebody who has been in this industry 20 or 30 years, and it doesn't automatically mean that they're a great groomer. There are plenty of people that are, don't misunderstand, but you can just as easily see somebody who has mastered these skills in 5 years what someone has taken a lifetime. Simply using an arbitrary amount of time to show authority is something we all do, but it should be something you consider if it's actually a viable case. I tell people all the time, I've been in the pet industry for 10 years, and I use that because I want to use a measuring stick, right? But what did I actually accomplish in that 10 plus years? And does it give me authority? I feel it does because I've opened 2 different businesses. I've run them successfully. I've sold one of them. But what if instead of doing that in this pet industry for 10 plus years, I had worked part-time at Petco for the last 10 years? Would I have the same authority? Or somebody who's worked at a vet clinic and their specialty was sedated shave downs, would they have that authority? And I certainly don't have the authority of someone who's been grooming 10 years and is on, groom team. That's amazing, right? So think about that when someone says they've been grooming 10 years. And again, I use this too. I'm sure you use this in your marketing. When I was in business for 5 years, we were really proud about that. But is that a real measuring stick that you haven't closed in 5 years? And when someone uses, I've been in business for 30 years, what questions should we consider when you're taking their advice? Do they have legal employees? I cannot tell you how many times I see in grooming forums about people that buy grooming shops from somebody who's been in business 20, 30 years, and they realize that all of their employees are independent contractors. I'm not going to get into the debate, but let's be real here. There are very, very, very few legal salons run with independent contractors because if they're an integral part of the business, they can't be independent contractors. There can be booth renters, but they would give a 1099 to their landlord, which would be the grooming salon owner. And a lot of times what happens when people take over these businesses, what ends up happening is they get audited. There's someone I know that is in the Southwest that they had been in a business for many, many, many years. Their mother owned the business. And when they took over the business and they had run their employees as independent contractors because that's what they were taught, that they got audited and they got a ton of fines, I guess almost $100,000 worth of back fines and back taxes. And they were just doing what their mother had taught them that they had seen this groomer do for 30 plus years. And a lot of times that's a red flag to the IRS when the business changes hands. So just remember that the grooming salon could have flown under the radar for 20 or 30 years undetected and unaudited. That does not make it okay or legal. And a lot of times, if you don't have to pay taxes or workers' comp on your employees, that saves a lot of money. That is why Uber, Lyft, all of those companies that have, independent contractors, and again, eventually that'll all come out in the wash. And that's why they do that, because they save, that company saves millions of dollars doing that. But your business, if you have independent contractors versus W-2 employees, trust me, I started my business wrong with independent contractors because that's what I thought was real. When I switched everybody to W-2, it cost me several $1,000s more a month to have my employees legally. And that wasn't even the workers' comp. That was just between taxes and certain payroll things for my state and federal. Another consideration is, do they own their building or were they grandfathered into a long lease that maybe they've had for 15 plus years? Landlords will often let rents stay well below market if the tenant has been there forever because they know the rent will be paid. If you start a lease in the same building, it may be double or even triple the amount. And if they bought the building, let's say 20 years ago, how many of you guys have tried to buy a house in the last 5 years? Whenever my mother talks about the house that she bought, 25 years ago, I laugh because that same house is now worth triple. So if I were to buy the commercial building, let's say they paid $100,000 for, that building is probably worth $500,000. And I understand there's inflation in this and that, but the property values of places has skyrocketed because there are more people trying to open more businesses. That's just the way things go, supply and demand. Another factor is landlords 15 to 20 years ago were more likely to rent to places with pets because the laws surrounding liability were much different. And a lot of the places like shopping malls were just simply not as built up. I look at even my hometown, which is Warwick, Rhode Island, and there is an airport in the middle of it. And when I'm driving through places that I grew up, places that used to be fields, places that used to be ball fields, and where we would play tag and hide and seek are gone. They're developed now. That's just what's going to happen. I mean, if you live somewhere very rural still, I'm sure places that used to be rural 20, 30 years ago are even more developed. And that's even if you live in a rural area. So if you live in a more suburban area, those places are getting more and more developed because the population is just simply growing. And then not only on top of that, but zoning laws have changed tremendously. They were much more lax 20, 30 years ago. If you have recently bought a house that was built, like I'm in New England, the house I bought was built in the 60s, which I know is much older than 20 or 30 years ago. But the laws that were allowed then and the laws of houses built in the 80s or the 90s, that was a lot different than now. I mean, I can't get a lot of these houses, if you go to redo things like your bathroom, you're going to hit a ton of tripwires because everything was grandfathered in. And some of you guys still live in places where the zoning laws are still pretty lax. And if you are, that's amazing. Do something now. I'm just kidding. But for those of us that are in places where, the zoning laws are incredibly frustrating. I know this was actually a concern I had with my grooming business, and it wasn't even owned 20 years. The person that owned it before me had it for 5 years, and I had it for 5 years. So we're talking 10 years. And the zoning in that time had changed where that building was because it had become more developed. And so when, after I left, there was another owner. And then after that owner moved the salon, guess what? That building could no longer own a pet grooming salon. So whoever took over that space after that person could not own a grooming salon because the zoning laws had changed. even though I have been a grooming salon for over 10 years. So again, this is something to consider. If you're taking advice from somebody who had started their business 20 or 30 years ago, they're not necessarily having the same difficulties that you may be facing. And I do want to warn people as I'm talking about these leases and everything. A lot of people talk to me, and I love, I'm never going to like judge anybody. I try not to. But what I find really interesting is the more people I talk to, the more things I hear about handshakes and verbal agreements. Please, 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 anyone going to be buying these ongoing businesses or anybody who is going to be taking over their business, whatever it is, try not to do any handshake or verbal leases. And the reason is because if you don't have it in writing, you don't have anything. Simply don't do that. No favors, no handshakes, no verbal agreements. If you can't go on Judge Judy and prove that this is a lease or this is an agreement, you're more likely to end up with nothing. And I know we trust people in the industry and we should trust people, but having something on paper protects not just you, it protects the old owner, and it protects your reputation in case if anything goes wrong, because somebody who's been in the business 30 years is always going to get the benefit of the doubt. So please be careful. And we're pointing out profitability of somebody who's been in business 20 or 30 years. Remember that their profit may be because their rent was really low or because they built out before building codes, like I said. And they may be places that got grandfathered into things that we simply can't get away with nowadays. We just can't. A lot of these places, if you were to take over the building, they may have to be gutted and redone. I know that for a fact. Like I said, there are many instances where honestly, a lot of these grooming salons are not OSHA compliant, which is basically if an employee were to work there, they could die. I know there was a place I went into to check on, and I will never name names, but you had to climb over cords. It was really obvious that when you're walking into the grooming salon, you're climbing over cords and you have to like go through one place to go another. If there was a fire, everyone would die. Like there was no hope of getting out of that grooming salon. And a lot of that was due that it was built and then they expanded. So they just added this and added that. And nowadays you're not going to get away with that. The building inspector went in there to look at that grooming salon. They'd be like, nope, this is not compliant. And there would be fines. So if you were to build out a new grooming salon, let's say you had to gut it and redo it, it'd easily be $20,000 or $50,000, easily. And that could honestly get rid of all of the profit of that business for several years. So let's talk about a very misunderstood concept. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm just going to have a drink. So I know this is good stuff, though. I promise this is good stuff. So let's talk about the self-employed versus the business owner. And this is really important for us as groomers to understand the difference. Self-employed means that you work for yourself within your business, which is generally grooming, could be managing, could be towel woman. Whatever it is, you are an integral part of the daily workings of the business. Now, the difference is a business owner is someone who gets a paycheck from their business. They do not have to be a part of the daily functions of the business for it to be profitable. Now, you might be like, why is that important? It's incredibly important because how many of us know someone who's been grooming 20 to 30 years and they're a veteran business owner and they still groom a full day's worth of dogs? And it's not because they want to, it's because they have to. They have to groom an entire day's worth of dog. The business model of a groomer owner is a self-employed person, and the only way it can be profitable is assuming that this owner will be in good health and be able to groom the same amount of dogs or cats for years to come. So if this owner gets cancer, needs surgery, God forbid, gets a bad bite, whatever, if they get injured, they're carrying their business financially. Without them, the business will crumble or the business will suffer. For them, having extra staff is icing on the cake, but extra staff, the staff is supposed to be the backbone of the business. In a perfect world, and again, you can become wealthy, guys, being an employee. You can be wealthy becoming a self-employed groomer or a business owner. But these are three very different things. And a business owner allows their staff to become the backbone of the business, and they're the icing on the cake. Whereas a self-employed groomer, they are the backbone of their business, and their employees are the icing on the cake. It's a very big employee. They just get to do it. They just get to eat the cake and go home and not have to do any of the hard stuff. Let me tell you, some days I'm like, I'd love to be an employee. That sounds fantastic. I will groom all day, go home, put my feet up. Ha, if only that lucky, right? Just kidding. Okay, so anyway, often these groomer owners, when they can't groom a full day or at all, the business has to close. And that's one of the key reasons that you see people closing a business of 20, 30 years or selling it. And you might be like, that seems normal for someone to retire like that. But you don't retire from a business. You retire from a job. And so that's a key component. Because if they were retiring from grooming and the business was profitable enough for them to continue owning it, they could own it for another 10, 20 years while their staff is able to run the business. However, because they can no longer perform the function, they must retire. And that is a key component when you're talking about being self-employed versus being a business owner. Because you don't retire from a business, you sell an asset. So if I'm selling a business, then I'm selling staff and everyone who can do that job. Does that make sense? So a self-employed groomer essentially owns her own job. It is not a business. That's the truth, which is fine as long as she is saved for retirement, just like an employee. Often she tries to sell her business after 20 or 30 years, but all she has is clientele that has been with her and has had equipment that is now obsolete. And I want you guys to hear that because it's so important. I'm perfectly happy if you guys want to be self-employed, but you need to start saving for retirement as if you guys are employees. So my employees and my self-employed groomers, you're going to save for retirement the same way. Now, if you self-employed groomers want to become a business owner, that's amazing. And you're going to have to still save as an employee until you get to this point. But what you're going to do is shift your focus in your grooming business. And those are all things we can talk about another time. But go ahead and start thinking about that, okay? So let's move on to marketing. And this, I think, is one of the biggest things I see you guys asking these groomers who've been in groomers. Blah, blah, blah. That's how you know it's live. So with marketing, this is how you know someone's been in business for 20 or 30 years and doesn't want to admit that they've been in business for 20 or 30 years. The way we are marketing now is so different than the way we were marketing 20, 30, 50 years ago. I mean, some of these groomers have been owning salons since the 70s or 80s. But let's talk about even since the 1990s. How many of you guys remember commercials in the 1990s? Just the way they were talking and doing things is so different than the way they're marketed now. So when we're looking at these groomers who've been grooming 20 or 30 years and they've owned their own business, they built their business when Yellow Pages was the easiest and biggest marketing beacon. How many of you guys now have seen a yellow book? Some of my younger groomers don't even know what they are. I remember saying to someone, oh yeah, the yellow book. And they were like, what do you mean? And I'm like, oh my God, I remember actually my mom had a second job bringing the yellow books around. That's what we did. It was crazy. And that was a telephone book and you would put ads in it and you wanted a big ad because then if someone was looking for a groomer, you could put a big ad in it. I remember when my dad owned an appliance repair company and he's like, I don't care if they know my name. All they need is appliance repair, same day, big ass phone number. And that's what worked. It's pretty simple. Do you think that would work nowadays? I don't. I don't think anybody would ever call. That's just different. marketing 30 years ago, you didn't have to contend with social media, which is good and bad. The good thing about social media is that you can reach a lot of people with visual things like pictures, before and afters, testimonials. The bad thing is that you can quick a nail and somebody can say that you tried to murder their dog, with pictures. So it has the good and the bad. Let's talk about the pets themselves. I was born in the 80s. How many of you guys were born in the 80s and remember looking for your first dog in the paper? In the 1990s, pets were not considered the same at all. Mixed breed puppies were given away for free in the paper instead of being sold for thousands of dollars online. And when you got that dog, leash laws were not nearly as enforced. My dog got loose all the time and nobody was really worried about it. They're like, he'll come home. Versus now, we have Facebook to spread the news out. My dog will go to doggy jail versus someone within the next 3 or 4 days will find my dog's name is Benji and we'll bring him back. Another thing is fleas were expected on a dog. I don't know about you guys growing up, but I remember my dog getting fleas every year and this was just expected. And that was very normal. Whereas nowadays fleas now this is partly because of the new advances we have, but fleas are considered a health issue now. I don't do flea pets in my van. I refer them to a vet to get topical or to get some sort of treatment. My mom fed my dog growing up. It's hard to admit. He ate Old Roy, which was $10 for a 50-pound bag. And he didn't get, he got a flea bath. He was not going to get, my mother would have never in a million years paid $40 a month for flea stuff. Never in a million years. Dogs were just different back then, and even more so in the 70s. So the way we're marketing now is incredibly different. People are not having children now, they're having fur kids. When you have fur kids, you're treating your pet very differently. So the way that you communicate with them, the way you're marketing to them, everything is so different. I think about the way that my grandparents think about my dog and the way I think about my dog. And of course, there's always going to be different facets of, different clienteles. Like we always talk about, the Dunkin' Donuts, the McDonald's, and the Starbucks client. But with that said, I want you to honestly think back to when you were a little kid. I know it's hard, but if you had a dog, are the ways that people talked about your dog the way they talk about them now? There are so many more dog everything. And that's why the pet industry doesn't have a recession. It's recession proof. Why? Because people love their animals in a way that they never have, especially now versus 30 years ago. The branding, the marketing, the expansion of a business today is not like it was 30 years ago. And like I said, especially in the pet industry, right now, if you guys were opening up a children's boutique, you would not take advice from the people who had opened Toys R Us. The way that things were done 30 years ago are not the way that they're done today. The next time you have somebody who went into business 20, 30 years ago and they don't have a website, they don't have a Facebook page, they have they've had the same clientele for 15 or 20 years, all of their clients are on their second or third dogs. Try to consider if you should be getting advice from somebody who has not hired somebody in the last 2 to 5 years, somebody who has not had to gain an enormous amount of new clients in the last 2 to 5 years. And we're going to keep changing. The way we're going to keep marketing and growing businesses is going to change all the time. It's going to keep changing, guys. And in this information age, we're going to have to keep growing with it. Forever and ever and ever and ever isn't going to suck, isn't it? It's fun. Business is fun. It's just like we're going to keep learning new haircuts and style. We're not going to just learn cocker patterns and all the poodle patterns. Now we have Asian fusion, we have color, we have more ways to express ourselves. And because of that, our business is more complicated. So next time a 20-30 veteran tries to give you really awful advice, they say, oh, just take out a big ad in the yellow pages, or they tell you some other, let's be honest, bullshit. Say, Okay, Boomer Groomer. It's going to be like my new hashtag, Boomer Groomer. Okay, Boomer Groomer. I like it. So anyway, guys, thank you so much. Do you have any more questions before I head out for the end of this live? I would love your opinion. I'm going to have a quick sip while you guys think on that. Oh, Lynn says hashtag truth. I don't know when you said that, Lynn, but I think I dropped a lot of truth today. Boom. Hashtag truth. All right, so it looks like there are no comments, which is perfectly cool, guys. I would love for you guys to comment later, or if you have anything you want to personally send me, you can always send it to my email, which is savvy, SAVVY, groomer, GROOMER, @gmail.com. I'll go ahead and put that in the bottom. So if you guys want to learn more, you can find me at savvygroomer.com/growwealthygrooming. You can join my waiting list for the new launch of our membership, which is going to be Grow Wealthy Grooming, where you will learn to grow your wealth of knowledge as an employee, self-employed groomer, or business owner. I'll see you next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Mondays, for another episode of Grow Wealthy Grooming. I'm Riverly, and as always, happy grooming, guys. Bye. Whoop, whoop.